wonderful people from the University of Cape Coast, precisely hospitality, tourism management. I warmly welcome you to the historic Cape Coast Castle. My name, Robert Morgan Mensah, also a product of your department. About 10 years ago, Professor Boachi and many others taught me. So glad I am to present to you information about the Cape Coast Castle, which is about 355 years old. Sequentially, this piece of land changed hands from the Portuguese, who named this area Cabo Corso, meaning short cape. So it was the English who changed it or translated it to mean Cape Coast. Cabo means cape, Corso, coast. So Cape Coast is not hyphenated. So everywhere you saw Cape Coast with hyphen, please, it is incorrect. So Swedish for the Portuguese here, Portuguese led and concentrated in Elmina. The Dutch also fought the Danes over here. When the Danes were defeated on this piece of land, they moved to Accra and built the Christianborg Castle in Accra, named after Christian IV of Denmark. And then soon the English also came in, fought the Dutch here, which coincided with the Anglo-Dutch War, which occurred in New Amsterdam, now New York, between 1660 and 1665. And this same castle housed the various governors appointed here by the Queen at the time. So remember, Cape Coast therefore became the capital town of Gold Coast until 1877. Following political and economic reasons, they moved the capital from Cape Coast Castle to the seat in Accra, Christianborg. That was about 142 years ago. And you know, Cape Coast also known as its educational exploit. Right from kindergarten to the highest level, we have all those schools here. It all started because when the Europeans were here, they had some of our mothers. Having raped them at the initial stage, some later became their concubines and therefore had to stay with them and give birth to such children. So they established schools for them in today's West African Museum Gallery, also at the Cape Coast Castle. I urge you, after the tour, you pass through and have a look and give yourself some sort of orientation. Behind me is the male dungeon of the Cape Coast Castle. Millions of enslaved Africans held there at a given time. Pretty soon we shall see that of the female dungeons. Also we have graves at the courtyard and then the cannons pointing towards the sea. Yes, the English were mindful of the Dutch threat, so they quickly established these weapons to ward off any pirate or any enemy that will come their way to fight over this land. So they had to establish them and took time to construct the edifice using our own ancestors. People to the castle as enslaved Africans were first brought from the immediate environment, later from the transitional zone of Ghana. You can mention Kumasi, Sunyani, Winchi, Techiman in the middle Ghana, and then Tamale, Yendi, Sisala, Salaga, the biggest and largest slave market at the time in northern Ghana, and some as far as Burkina Faso of today, most of whom were captured as a result of tribal wars, ethnic conflicts. So people brought here, many of them were prisoners of war. Of course, there were some slave raiders, kidnappers. Mention could be made of Babatu and Samori and what have you, when they raided some communities up north, captured innocent souls, march them to the forts and castles dotted along the coast of Ghana. My dear brother, my sister, over here, enslaved Africans were examined thoroughly. They look at the body, before they decided their fate, whether they should be bought or not. So it wasn't every single being brought here as enslaved African that had a purchase. The dungeons over here are not the same as that of Elmina Castle's dungeons. This is an underground cell. But the Elmina dungeons were very flat storage rooms that they later converted into dungeons. But over here you have to go down, and the structure equally is not the same. And materials used for the construction Surprisingly now, they did not use cement nor iron rod. Available materials we have indicate that the English used ground oyster shells, limestone and oil as building materials for the construction of the edifice. And the same Africans were used to construct it. So labor here by the blacks. And as I turn on the light, an indication that there was no electricity when the enslaved Africans were here. And therefore the openings there provided them the light, ventilation day and night. The enslaved Africans also slept on straw mats on the floor. And when it drained through the trench, as we can see, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. Initially, they provided them with boxes at the corners for the pool. But my sister, my brother, judging by the number of people held here at a given time, between 150 and 200, if you got to the box and it was already full of poo, what else do? You will be compelled to poo at the edge of the wall. So some did that. So the poo, and that accumulated to this height, where you see the white mark here, from the base to this side all over, was covered with solidified human waste. And how did that come about? Barely 45 years ago, in 1973, archaeological work was done here by student body like ourselves from University of Ghana, Legon, to conduct a research here. That they said they could see bricks floor by the same dungeon, part of it, different materials altogether. So there was a need to find out why the differences exist. Then they started digging. They came across some shackles. We have some in the main museum gallery. The rest were taken to Accra Museum. If time will permit, you can go to the museum and you see a whole lot over there. And therefore took sample of the material from the dungeon to the lab, and testing revealed that the materials made up of sweat, tears, blood, vomit of enslaved Africans, including poo-poo, that had solidified to the level of the white mark there. So after the archaeological work, the students were asked to put the markings on the wall to indicate to people, to the castle, that was what they found barely 45 years ago. In fact, the professor was here about 3 months ago. He's now in his 80s. I believe at the time with the PhD, he was in his 40s when they did the work over here. So main dungeon of the Cape Coast Castle segmented into 5s, and each section had about 150 to 200. So by extension, you multiply the 150 to 200 by 5, you record between 700 and 1,000 in the main dungeon of the Cape Coast Castle. And my dear students, the arc here serve as columns or pillars, because they didn't use rod which you can bend. This is what they did, and then it's in support of the first and second stories. And all this by the enslaved Africans' labor. It was not an easy exercise at all. So in as much as we remember those who perish during the trade, we must as well appreciate those who survived the journey as well. Because if all had died within a short space of time, perhaps we wouldn't have had the number of people we have in America and Caribbean communities as African American Caribbeans in the diaspora. So we need to appreciate them as well. My dear people, when you look at the floor here, you see the bricks are covered with certain materials. These materials made up of poo-poo, wee-wee, vomit, blood, tears, and soil together. You see, the surface here is not the same as the first room just visited. Yeah, but they were all bricks, as we can see this very one, but they've all been covered. And again, you see the side is also scooped all over. And here we have the African traditional temple. It forms part of our heritage, our culture, the way some of us prayed, worship God Almighty using different kinds of objects. Elsewhere we have lakes, lagoons, trees, in some cases animals, which are considered sacred. But here we have a rock, goes by the name Nana Tabil. In fact, we have 77 of them in the metropolis. The Fosu Lagoon you just drove past by is one of the top 5 deities. Nana Tabil, Fosu Lagoon, Etuyi, Fenya, Paprata, they are all around. Some reside in tree, but this one resides in rock, and the priest in charge is a man sitting right over here. And then there is a blockade from this angle through to this side. This wall we see here in front with a white cloth, there was a tunnel behind the wall where the male slaves at the time walked through to join the female counterpart at door of no return for shipment. So it meant that anytime the enslaved slave ships arrived from England, enslaved Africans here didn't go out the way we came in. They had their exit towards this direction until 1834, a year after slave trade finally ended in British West Africa. Ordered by one Captain George McLean, the tunnel was closed. Went ahead, established the first court of justice on our soil. And this is why we can't see the tunnel from here. And remember, 1807, slave trade was first banned or abolished in England. But it didn't stop, it continued underground, illegally even in this castle, until 1833, after William Wilberforce and his team, Thomas Clarkson, Gravin Sharp, and so many peacemakers in England ensured that the slave trade became a thing of the past in England. Then they finally abolished it. But many also believe that it was because of industrial renaissance, since machines could do more work better than that of the manual. That was why the English also stopped. So they blocked the tunnel. Soon we go out and then we see the tunnel from the appropriate angle. As we go, we can equally imagine the architecture aspect of the castle, and telling you that they didn't use cement or road to construct it is so amazing. Okay, read over here, presented by politicians, well-wishers, corporate organizations, individuals, African American Caribbeans, between the month of July and August, as we celebrate Pan-African Historical Theatre Festival, which is by annual event, and then Emancipation Day is annual event. So 2 years and 1 year, respectively. This presented by First Lady of USA, 3rd of October. She visited here and had a complete private tour with my immediate boss, Mr. Kwesi Esel Branson, who is also a product of University of Cape Coast and also at the same department, Geography and Tourism Department. And he completed before I did. President Barack Obama and the family also presented one. It is looking ugly this time around, so I don't want you to take a picture of it. In the dungeons, if the merchant realized that there were too many in the dungeons at a time, they had to take them out to where we have the graves, where they could feed them easily. So they were fed twice daily, in the morning and the evening, but sometimes once, depending upon availability of food. But then if they were less in the dungeon, granted that from the first room to the last room, they had, let's say, 100, 20, 20, 20, 20, 20. You can push all of them to one section. So you can do the cleaning, and after that, you bring them back to their respective sections where you can easily feed them. But if a section could hold 100 or more, there's no way you can feed them in that particular section. Ventilation, one, but the purpose was to serve as a spy hole where an officer who was of course black to monitor the activities of the colleagues here and report to the officers periodically if some were fighting, some needed urgent help, some dead, so they could easily attend to them. And on top of this third chamber in the main dungeon was the English church. Out of me is C.B. Whitehead's grave. He died here in 1812, 2nd of July. He was shot dead at the time the English-Dutch were fighting on our land in the name of Gold Coast. But the English denied that he died of malaria attack. They didn't accept that the Dutch killed him. And the popular George MacLean's grave, that is where we have here. No, 1847, 1846. MacLean was a Scottish. The wife was Letitia Elizabeth London. Yeah, she came here to say hello to the husband, only to see that the husband was in bed with one Ellen Bannerman. Yeah, so 2 months later, Letitia was found dead, and so much controversies they raised as to what exactly killed Letitia Elizabeth London. First group said malaria yellow fever, which was common because at the time the Europeans named the west coast of Africa as the white man's graveyard, meaning they don't live longer. 2 months, 6 months, 1 year, dead. But then MacLean stayed there for 17 years before he died. Second group said Letitia poisoned herself out of jealousy because of what the husband was doing. And third group also came out with a version that MacLean and Ellen connived to poison Letitia dead. And she was 36. So as I speak to you now, C.B. Whitehead 38 gunshot, George MacLean malaria 46, Letitia Elizabeth London 36 yellow fever malaria suicide poison jealousy. I think if you selected any of them, you are correct. The merchant harvested rainwater from the roofs, the pipes, as you can see, PVC now, those roofs made of copper. To harvest rainwater here, and that was what they used to prepare food and drink for the slave Africans. In the morning, in the evening, as I said, they came out to eat and later went back to their respective dungeons. Water in now is pipe-borne water, and it is used for restoration work and then the washroom as well. It's about 10,000 gallons. Shall we now be on top of it? Overlooking the fantastic Atlantic Ocean, British chose to call it Gulf of Guinea or Port of Gold. Now, when the ships arrived, they docked almost a kilometer away from the castle, and they used smaller canoes, dive canoes, to transport the slaves from there of no return to the bigger ships and therefore to the various destinations. And these are the canals in the introduction I talked about. Apart from this, traveling 300 meters at short, and then 500 meters from the bigger ones there. That indeed helped the English stay here for a very long period of time until 1957, 6th of March, when we gained our political independence before the liberators of Ghana. All forts and castles of Ghana designated World Heritage according to UNESCO in 1979. This area meant for ventilation and security. Ventilation in the sense that this is part of the tunnel from where we saw the shrine. And one was an open, obviously, quality of air will go in. And then also there was an officer here who stood and monitored the slaves as they moved and did a count of them as well. So granted that 100 were dispatched from where we saw the shrine, he must also get the same 100. If after the count he recorded, let's say 83, meaning 17 missing. So that was the only time they apply ladder, go down, look left to right and see what was happening to the remaining 17. If out of the 17, 7 were dead, they will carry the body and then to the sea, and the remaining 10 who were unconscious or whatever, they will give them medication. So ventilation and security was why they opened it here. We see the end of the tunnel. And remember, they branded them with hot iron metals after they had been purchased from the Palaver Hall. And that branding took place at the courtyard where we have the graves. So maybe at the pointed end of the iron bore the trademark of the company or the buyer, the initial. So maybe M could go for Manchester as L, Liverpool, Plymouth P, and Bristol B. In fact, all these were UK companies, right? And this is UK property. And my dear people, this is the end of the tunnel. So both ends sailed, ordered by Captain George McLean. So they had this move like this. And this was the exit initially for the men. So out to the boat, to the bigger ships, and off to the various destinations. Later they closed the side on the basis that anytime the seawater was very rough, the waves coming, disturbing them here and there. So they had to block the side, and the men came out this way, joined the women at the door of no return. So we now move to the female dungeon. Before that, punishment cell for the ladies who disagreed to officers' agreement. By this I meant if the officer wants to rape you and you said no, you fought him for the first, second, third time, they say you were stubborn, they will push you here till you agree to what was disagreed. And if you said yes, and the way they will frustrate you, you say yes, they will take you to the shore, wash off the blood on you upstairs, after the way back to the dungeons. So it was only when you became his concubine that you will no more be in the dungeons. So those children that were given education, most of them were named after European names: Van Dyke, Van der Poel, Holbrook Smith, Bramwell, Richardson, Hatton, Bannerman, and the rest. If they baptized you to Christian faith, then you are Deborah, Esther, Rebecca, Paul, Peter, John, Joseph, Mark, Benjamin. Because Mami Boachiwa Ayadon, Ibienchuku, Okunku, Sebefi Agbegbleu, officer says such names very difficult to pronounce. Let's see the female dungeon. Also, between 150 to 250 this side, same over there. So the maximum hold capacity of enslaved Africans in the Cape Coast Castle at a given time was 1,500. 500 the female, 1,000 the males. And so sad to say, throughout the period that they stayed in the dungeons, neither the male nor the female washed down. And that was a very difficult moment. So disease is very common, and it was not easy. It was not yourself, if you don't take shower a day or two, how do you feel? Full of discomfort. And you staying here, not even you alone, with others. And reasons why when African American Caribbeans came here, you see them weeping, crying here and there. It was not easy. And here we have the popular inscription, the door of no return. The gate was big as this according to records, but then they made the exit very small, very narrow, where you will have to bend down to the various destinations: North, South Carolinas, Atlanta, Georgia, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Haiti, Guyana, Suriname, just to mention but a few. Brazil received the largest number in terms of population as nation. So, per the nature of the trade, Europe, Africa, America, Europe, it was like a triangle, and therefore they call it triangular slave trade. Over here, one woman father by name Bartolomeo de las Cascas said, if the Indians here cannot work better for you European settlers in America, then why don't you go in for the blacks? So he endorsed the trade, later regretted, too little, too late at the time. dug out canoe like this. They boarded and then to the big ship. Tuesdays, fishermen along the coast of Ghana do not go to fish. As the case in academia. Well, Sundays we don't go to school, but these days it is not like that because of the distance education that had been introduced by the various universities. So these days, Saturdays, Sundays, people go to school. But those days, no. So they use the Tuesday day to rest, mend their toilet, if any, or if they have other engagement elsewhere. They will simply go ahead and do it. The door of return is 21 years old, 1998, when we celebrated Emancipation Day Festival for the first time in the country, whereby 29 African American Caribbean skeletons were redeemed from New York and then Jamaica. That of New York was Samuel Carlson, a naval officer, and then Madam Krista, human rights activist, lawyer by profession. Both were descendants of enslaved Africans, but they had contact with their family members and they had the skeletons exhumed, flown there from New York to Accra. Accra by way to a village, a fishing village we call Abanzi, where we have Fort Amsterdam. That's not too far from here. Even though that fort was built by the English, but get the name Fort Amsterdam because the Dutch made amends by defeating the English over there and renamed it Fort Amsterdam. The original name is Fort York. Just as New Amsterdam was renamed New York, Fort York also became Fort Amsterdam. I hope these two European countries are today friends. So from Fort Amsterdam, they came by the ocean. Once they arrived here, the casket of Christian cousin laid, traditional prayers said on them as well as Christian prayers, after which they ushered them in back to their root. So symbolically, the two skeletons represent the millions of people that were enslaved throughout Africa, not only Gold Coast, because Goree Island in Senegal, Mozambique, Equatorial Guinea, Nigeria, Cameroon, South Africa, Kenya, and the rest, all those places they took human beings as enslaved Africans. But Ghana, as the leading country at the time, as far as transatlantic slave trade was concerned, the authorities adopted Ghana to celebrate that festival. In fact, it started in Caribbean communities way back in 1833 after chattel slavery ended over there. So it was a festival which was actually borrowed by our former president Jerry Lawrence when he visited the Caribbean communities. His visit coincided with the festival, and then he bought into that product, and we started celebrating it every year. So 1990, remember, President Jerry John Rawlings was the head of state or president of the Republic of Ghana. So after the ceremony, we put this inscription there. Sir Sanford Freeling was the governor at the time. The capital was moved to Accra in 1877 because of pressure mounted on him by the locals. Remember the land bill tax and poll tax ordinance. When the English officers here broke, they wanted to leave the locals to pay their soldiers, and the locals said no, we wouldn't allow that to happen. Already you've taken our land, you enslave us, slave trade is no more. We say go ahead, take our gold. They say you don't need money, you need money to pay your soldiers. We will not allow that. And the constant besieging of the castle perhaps necessitated the movement of the seat of government from this castle to the Accra castle. And all these were storage rooms, what I was talking about at the initial stage. This is how Elmina dungeons look like. Too open. But in our case, this is where they are. Yeah. Underground. Very deep. One of the oldest features we have in this castle is this door, a little over 2 centuries. Pitch pine wood, copper on it, giving it strong protection. The middle and the last doors removed. Whoever was confined beyond the third door as an enslaved African, never came back alive. They were the men who often used the shackles to hit the face of the officers, strangle the neck, trying to fight for their freedom. To them, they never committed any crime whatsoever in their respective villages and towns. But as a result of tribal wars, some became prisoners of war and what have you. And look at the terrible conditions in the dungeons. They could not contain it any longer. So anytime they had opportunity, some of them used the shackles, fighting the officers. So for first, second, third, fourth time, you became a thorn in their flesh. Because if they don't kill you first, they may end up you killing them one after the other. So they had to push them there. The indisciplined English soldiers were also held here in that room for a short while, maybe some few hours. They released them for them to, do things right. Let's go to the condemned cell. So whoever held there died and never came back. They died of starvation and suffocation since they didn't give them any food, any water whatsoever. In fact, they created this to serve as a lesson or the deterrent to other captives. So if you were there and had conceived of fighting an officer, you may probably rescind your decision. And this is why we have, so one of the oldest fittings in the castle is this door, more than 200 years. The Palava Hall, we call the area, looking refurbished, just like the West African Museum you are here to visit, is beneath this floor. This was where the buying and selling of the slave Africans officially took place. So here they will examine your strength, your teeth, your body before they will buy you or not. And there was always confusion, cacophony of noise, misunderstanding over here, who buys who and at what price. Everybody wants the best, but not everybody wants to pay the best price. So between and among themselves, they were fighting verbally over the enslaved Africans paraded here for sale. So in their own wisdom, they named the venue Palava Hall to justify the event that occurred over here. Now seminars, workshops, symposia are organized here, so the area is well maintained. Now shops all over. And then you see the churches. The immediate eye is the Anglican Church, one with a cross, Roman Catholic Church, a Methodist Church, cream color with green. Also on the hill is Fort William, or the lighthouse, built for defense of the castle. This is where the first court of justice started. Established by Captain George McLean. He later became judicial assessor by force law, just to ensure that human lives and properties were all the time protected. So the authorities after him decided to honor him by naming the area after him as McLean's Hall. The land that points further to the sea, over there in the horizon, like a peninsula, is where we have the Elmina Castle located. Whenever you are there, given brighter weather, you can see Cape Coast Castle as well. Portuguese 1482, they were there for 155 years. And then on the 29th of August 1637, the Dutch traveled there, dislodged them, and Dutch stayed in Elmina for 235 years. After 1872, the Dutch said they were no more interested on the coast of Ghana. Gold, slave, they were no more interested. So they ceded the castle to Britain on mutual grounds in 1872. So the English also stayed in Elmina for 85 years until Ghana's independence 62 years ago. So Portuguese 155 years, Dutch 235, English 85, Ghana 62 and still counting, put together 537 years old. So Elmina Castle is the oldest European stone in tropical West Africa still in existence. So that is the fort. You can look through. You see the fort On the hill. Good. Those soldiers there use flags and light to signal that enemies coming from the land or from the sea. Where a soldier will be in, protecting the governor and no one else. Now, this was a church and that was a classroom. But then this library was created a little over 2 decades. The idea was to inculcate the habit of reading into kids in and around the communities. Well, unlike the traditional libraries, you need to pay a token before you get a book. No, over here it is not like that. You also to ensure that after a week or 2, you bring the book back without paying anything. The early Europeans came to our shores with aim of establishing contact with us. They had a hidden agenda. They never made their agenda known to our ancestors at the initial stage. First they said exploration, evangelism, gold trading, but finally slave trading, where millions of enslaved Africans were taken from the shores of Gold Coast and elsewhere in Africa. And for you to walk all the way from Tamale, Burkina Faso to this area, it was not an easy task. Some obviously died on the way, some at the time of capture, and then some also in the dungeons because of the terrible conditions over there. And then on the high seas where we call the Middle Passage, some also died, and then at the destination. But we thank God, those who survived the journey have given birth to so many descendants, where we have them in the Caribbean communities as well as the American communities. So every year now and then they come to visit the facility, either at the Panafest level or Emancipation Day level, or sometimes the individual own accord. So they do come, and in that way it has also boosted the tourism industry. And of course it has created jobs for direct and indirect jobs for Ghanaians. Let us unite, recognize that we are one people, one body before God Almighty. If we should go by the stories here, some of us will stop going to church because it is very difficult to believe that they had a dungeon and on top of it was a church. The same thing happened in Elmina Castle, Osu Castle, and other forts and castles that I have visited. Reasons why they did that, only God can explain to us. They didn't get any place at all but on top of a dungeon where they said they will serve their maker, and another group of people under the church also suffering here and there. So a little over 4 million enslaved Africans passed through Cape Coast Castle throughout the period. And then Elmina recorded 11.6, some areas they said 13.6. And then Accra Castle had a little over 3 million. And thousands through some fort, James Fort, Usher Fort in Accra, Antonio, Apollonia, Orange, Sebastian, Metarin Crossing, Western region. Some of the forts like Victoria and William were built for defense of the castle. So such forts, they didn't keep slaves over there. And again, because of rising sea level, some of the forts today, we can't trace them, either submerged or destroyed completely by the devastating waves. If you should travel Keita today, you will see Fort Princetonstein, 1784, built by the Danish. Half of the fort is already in the sea. So it needs a dire need of help. Sea defense must be constructed to keep it safe for posterity, not to judge us. Robert Morgan Mensah is my name. Glad I am to meet you at the Cape Coast Castle. I completed University of Cape Coast in 2009. I studied tourism, and therefore I was in the tourism and geography department. And one of my finest lecturers I've ever had in that school was Professor Educhum Boachi.